Day, welcome to News Express. Nigerian political landscape has been dramatically altered by two far-reaching decisions of the Supreme Court rulings that has not only settled lingering disputes within two major opposition parties, but also exposed deeper institutional tensions about legality, power, and democratic order. In a single day, the Apex Court restored the leadership of the African Democratic Congress under David Mark, while simultaneously nullifying the National Convention of the People's Democratic Party, throwing the latter into what many observers are already describing as a full-blown leadership crisis with uncertain consequences for the country's political future. The ruling on the African Democratic Congress marks a decisive intervention in what had become a protracted legal and political standoff over who legitimately controls the party's national structure. At the center of the dispute were two prominent figures, former Senate President David Mark and former Osun State Governor Rauf Arepashala, whose emergence as national chairman and national secretary respectively had been challenged in court by aggrieved actors seeking to hold their recognition by the Independent National Electoral Commission. The plaintiffs had pursued both interim and interlocutory injunctions aimed at preventing the due from functioning in their roles, arguing that their continued occupation of party offices will prejudice the outcome of the substantive case. However, the Supreme Court's reasoning carefully dissected the procedural history of the matter and arrived at a conclusion that effectively dismantled the foundation of the appeal. Justice Mohammed Garba, delivering the judgment, emphasized that the trial court had neither granted nor refused the injunction being sought, but had instead taken a procedural step by ordering that all parties be put on notice. This distinction, while technical, proved decisive because it meant that the constitutional provision allowing appeals of rights in injunction matters did not apply. Without an actual decision granting or refusing the injunction, the appellants were required to seek leave before filing an appeal, a step they failed to take, thereby rendering their appeal incompetent in the eyes of the court. Beyond the immediate outcome, the judgment offered an important clarification of the legal concept of status quo ante bellum, a phrase often invoked in politically charged disputes, but frequently misunderstood in their application. The Supreme Court describes such orders as preservative in nature, designed only to maintain a temporary balance between parties and prevent irreversible actions while a case is still being determined. Justice Garba underscored that court possesses inherent powers to issue such orders, but only within the lifespan of active proceedings, noting that only a matter has been fully resolved, there is nothing left to preserve. But settling aside the lower court's order and allowing the appeal, the Apex Court effectively restored the authority of the Mark-led leadership, a development that the ADC has since celebrated as a validation of both their internal processes and their broader commitment to the rule of law. The reaction from the African Democratic Congress was swift and emphatic, with party officials framing the judgment as a decisive vindication of their legitimacy and a rebuke of what they describe as attempts to undermine their leadership through legal manipulation. The party has gone further to question the role of the Electoral Commission in the dispute, arguing that the dear recognition of the Mark-led structure was neither a grave error in judgment or a deliberate act that compromised institutional neutrality. This narrative reflects a broader pattern in Nigerian politics where judicial victories often translate into political capital, reinforcing claims of legitimacy while simultaneously deepening mistrust of regulatory bodies. If the ADC ruling brought clarity and consolidation, the Supreme Court's decision on the People's Democratic Party has produced the exact opposite effect, plugging one of Nigeria's most prominent opposition parties into uncertainty and internal disarray. The court invalidated the PDP's National Convention held in Ibadan in November 2025, a gathering that has produced a factional leadership aligned with former Minister Taminu Turaki. The basis for this decision was not merely procedural, but fundamentally tied to the principle of obedience to court orders, which the apex court treated as sacrosanct in a functioning democracy. Justice Stephen Adder, who delivered the lead judgment, adopted a tone that was both firm and cautionary, stating unequivocally that the convention had been conducted in a defiance of a subsisting order of the Federal High Court. According to the court, this act of disobedience was not in dispute and therefore stripped the appellants of any moral or legal standing to seek relief. The judgment went further to characterize the conduct as a direct threat to the administration of justice, emphasizing that the authority of the courts cannot be selectively acknowledged based on convenience or political expediency. Perhaps even more damaging to the PDP factional involved was the Supreme Court's condemnation of what they describe as forum shopping, a practice where litigants seek out courts likely to deliver favorable rulings even when other courts has already issued binding orders on the same matter. The court noted that instead of appealing the original restraining order, the appellants approached another high court to obtain a conflicting directive that allowed them to proceed with the convention. This maneuvering, the court held, constituted an abuse of judicial process of the highest order, striking at the integrity of the legal system and undermining public confidence in the judiciary. The consequences of the ruling are far-reaching and immediate, as the invalidation of the Ibadan Convention effectively nullifies all decisions and appointments that emerge from it. This includes the functional leadership structure that has been operating within the party, thereby creating a vacuum at the highest levels of the PDP's national organization. The situation is further complicated by the court's affirmation of suspensions affecting key party officials, a development that removes additional pillars of authority and leaves the party without a clear chain of command. In response to the ruling, leading figures within the PDP moved quickly to contain the fallout, with governors such as Seyi Makinde of Oyo State and Bala Mohammed of Bauchi State convening an emergency meeting in Abuja alongside members of the party's National Executive Committee, Board of Trustees, and other key organs. The urgency of this gathering underscores the gravity of the situation, as stakeholders grappled with the challenge of restoring order and preventing further fragmentation within the party. The PDP's Board of Trustees, led by Adolphus Nwabara, has since stepped forward to consume interim leadership in what they describe as a constitutional intervention aimed at stabilizing the party. By invoking provisions of the party's constitution, the BOT has positioned itself as a temporary custodian of authority, tasked with guiding the PDP through this period of crisis while laying the groundwork for the emergence of a new leadership structure. This move, while legally grounded, also reflects the delicate balance between constitutional procedure and political pragmatism, as the party seeks to maintain cohesion in the face of competing factions. Despite these efforts, internal divisions remain deeply entrenched, particularly between blocs aligned with different power centers within the party. The faction associated with Governor Makinde has made it clear that they will not give control to rival groups, including those linked to the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike. This resistance highlights the enduring nature of functional politics within the PDP, where personal loyalties and regional interests often intersect with ideological differences to produce complex and sometimes volatile alignments. What emerges from this development is a broader narrative about the role of the judiciary in Nigeria's political system, particularly at a time when internal party disputes are increasingly being resolved through litigation rather than negotiation. The Supreme Court's twin rulings send a clear message that while political actors may engage in intense competition for power, they remain bound by the rule of law and cannot circumvent judicial authority without consequences. This principle, while universally acknowledged in theory, often encounters resistance in practice, especially in high-stakes political contexts where the incentives to bend or ignore the rules can be significant. The court emphasizes on the sanctity of judicial orders is particularly noteworthy in this context, as it reinforces the idea that democracy is not only about elections and representation but also about coherence to legal norms and institutional processes. By invalidating the PDP convention on grounds of disobedience, the Supreme Court has effectively drawn a red line, signaling that any attempt to undermine the judiciary will be met with decisive action regardless of the political implications. At the same time, the constructing outcomes for the ADC and the PDP illustrate how legal clarity can either consolidate or destabilize political organizations depending on the circumstances. For the ADC, the judgment provides a foundation for unity and forward momentum, allowing the party to focus on strengthening their structures and preparing for future electoral contests. For the PDP, however, the ruling introduces a period of introspection and uncertainty, as leaders must navigate the dual challenges of rebuilding legitimacy and reconciling internal differences. As Nigeria looks ahead to the 2027 general elections, the implications of these rulings are likely to extend beyond the immediate parties involved, influencing the broader dynamics of opposition politics and shaping the strategies of both incumbents and challengers. Whether the PDP can recover from their current crisis and present a united front remains an open question. While the ADC's renewed sense of legitimacy may position them as a more credible alternative in an increasingly competitive political environment. In the final analysis, these Supreme Court decisions represent more than just legal resolutions to party disputes. They are reaffirmation of the central role of the judiciary in safeguarding democratic order. They serve as a reminder that political power, no matter how contested or converted, must ultimately operate within the boundaries of the law, and that any attempt to bypass those boundaries carries risks not only for individual actors but for the system as a whole. For more updates and in-depth analysis, stay with us on News Express. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and join the conversation in the comment section. I am Cassie Tony. Many thanks for watching and do have a beautiful day.